This is Gemara in Sotah, Daf Beis. Here we go, beginning once again an incredible new Masechta. And as always, we begin with the bracha, that the same fire, vigor, enthusiasm that we have today, as we begin a new Masechta, a new topic, a new limud, should continue to propel us and push us to learn more, to chazer more, each and every day, ultimately, for the 49 days of this Masechta, and of course, throughout Shas. So we begin on Daf Beis Amud Aleph. Says the Mishnah, Ha mikane leishtoi. One who is a mikane, one who warns. The word mikane comes from the word that the Torah uses of kinoi, as the top Rashi in Baruch Hashem. It's been a long time. Nidarim and Nazir, which we don't have Rashi. We don't have the ultimate Rabbi, but Baruch Hashem, Rashi is back. So we start right at the top. The Rashi teaches us, Lishna dikra nakat. Why does the Mishnah use the word hamikane? It could use the word hamasre, which is the conventional word to mean warn. So Rashi says, Lishna dikra nakat, teaches us the Torah's word, vikine es ishtoi. As the Torah says that you warn your wife. And now Rashi continues by saying that the Gemara is going to teach us what the Lashon Kinoi is, which Amir Tashem will be at the end of today's daf, or the beginning of tomorrow's daf. And Rashi continues by saying that eventually we're going to learn, how does one warn his wife? What is the words to use? And Rashi foreshadows by telling us, Al tisteri im ish ploini. Do not seclude yourself with a certain man. So says the Mishnah, Hamekane leishtoi, someone who warns his wife, and as Rashi just filled in the blanks, not to be secluded with a specific man. Rav Eliezer, Mekane lo al pi shnayim. You need two edim, two witnesses, to effect a kinoi, a halachic warning, umashke al pi eid echad. And in order to require her to drink, what's she drinking? She's drinking the mei saita. She's drinking the water that we're going to discuss, which is going to prove either her veracity that she did not seclude with the man, or Rahman al-Islam, it's going to show that she did and cause her death. Oy al biatzmai, or even by himself, he can force her to drink by saying that she was secluded. So the warning, says Rav Eliezer, requires two people. But the seclusion, the drinking, that is going to be able to be done with even one aid or by himself. And Rashi points out, even if there are no aidim they secluded, only himself or one aid, that's going to be enough to say that they saw her being secluded after the warning was given, and will require her to drink the mei saita to see whether she indeed did something illegal with this man. Rav Yeshua Imer says, Rav Yeshua, no. Mikane la bishnayim. The warning indeed has to be with two. But as well, says Rav Yeshua, umashka al bishnayim. The drinking as well has to be with two eidim. Ketan mikane la, continues the Mishnah. How does he warn his wife? Oimer la, he tells her b'fnei shayim, in front of these two people, Al tidabri imish blaini. Do not speak with this man. And she spoke with him. Says the Mishnah, if that is what happened, she still muttered to her husband, she's allowed to eat truma. But Beis HaSefer, not to Beis HaSefer, that's a school, but in a secluded Nichnesa imai, she enters with him to a secluded area. Vishasa imai, and she delays, and she is in that area with him. Kidei toma, the amount of time to be mitame, the amount of time to have tashmish, which the Gemara, of course, will discuss. Asura lebeisa, v'asura lechel b'truma. Then she's forbidden to her household, and then if he was a kayin, she's no longer allowed to eat truma. Continues the Mishnah, and similarly v'mes, and if it's such a scenario in which she violated the kinoi, she violated the warning, she went and she was secluded, and then the husband dies, and obviously she falls to Yibam, she has the potential to marry the husband's brother. Chayletzes v'loy misyabemes. She cannot do Yibam, she can only do Chalitza to make sure that she's mutter to marry someone else. So a loaded Mishnah, part A of the Mishnah teaching us how many people are necessary, how many Eidim to effect a appropriate kinoi warning, stira, seclusion. Part B teaching us how to do that kinoi and in what way it's a real kinoi. She merely is talking to that man, it is not a problem. But once she's nichlasa imala beisa seiser, once she secludes with that man, that is when there is a kinoi, and that is when she's going to be forbidden. Says the Gemara, Mechti. We begin Gemara Sotah as we begin many Masechtos. And this is going to sound very familiar back to our Nazir days. Mechti Tanami Nazir Salik. We just finished Sechus Nazir. My Tana de Gatani Saita. What is the reason that the Tana learned Sotah after Nazir? Says the Gemara Kid Rebbe. The Tanya, as we learned to the Raisa Rebbe Omer. What is the reason that the Torah has a smichos between Parshas Sotah to Parshas Nazir? Laimer Lacha, says Rabbi, he teaches us Kol Araya Sotah b'Kilkula. If one sees a Sotah in her kilkul, in her disgrace, and Rashi points out what is the disgrace of a Sotah? She's nivala, she's disgusting, ubaishsa, and she's embarrassed. Why? As we'll see in a few days, because they tied a rope above her breast and she was basically exposed as she had to drink the Mei Sotah, which we'll get to soon enough. So if someone sees such a terrible, dreadful process, and you were privy to be around at such a situation in the Beis HaMikdash, or at the Ishar, we should say, Yazir Atzoi Min Hayayin. Do something about it. As all the Bali Musar say, when something you see, it's not just you happen to see something. It's a message from Hashem. Take it to heart and make it affect your own personal life. Yazir atzmai min hayayim. Become a Nazir. Why? What does wine have to do with anything? So Rashi points out the obvious, because the wine is that which brings one to kalas roish, to levity and frivolity, v'hugaram lo, and that is what causes all issues. So says the Gemara, beautiful. So the Torah puts Nazir and Sotah together. So listi Sotah, v'hadar listi Nazir, which is the way, Rashi points out, that the Psukim actually write it. First Sotah, and then Nazir. What's the reason that it says Nazir and then Sotah? Answers the Gemara, we got to go a few Masechtas back. Ay, diditanik subis. We learned Ksubis. And you remember that last parak of Ksubis? V'tana Hamadir. Spoke about Nedarim. Between a husband and wife. And once he spoke about Nedarim, Tana Nedarim. V'ai did Tana Nedarim. And once we learn Nedarim, Tani Nazir, Tedami the Nedarim, that's comparable. And then, V'katani Sotah. Now once we're learning Nazir, then we come along and we learn Sotah. As Rabbi taught us that one makes himself a Nazir when he sees the Sotah. And that is the progression of Ksubis all the way to where we are today to Nazir. Just for one moment, let's look at the top Taisus. Taisus bothered that back in Mesechus Nazir Daf Beis we said that the reason why we learned Nazir is due to Sotah. And we just learned now a different reason. We just learned that Nedarim are Dami Nazir. And Nazir was learned after Nedarim. So Taisus points out a fine nuance. Like a bab is seder nashim el agav Sotah. Why is Nazir here? Due to the Sotah. And once it's here, because it's similar to Nedarim, it's placed after Nedarim from Mayri Rabbi. So what do we see? We see that the reason that Nazir is in Seder Nashim is the equation between Nazir and Sotah. The placement within Seder Nashim, that has to do with the progression of Ksubis Nedarim, Nazir, and then Sotah. And then Sotah. And now we go back to the Gemara and we get involved in the din of the Mishnah of the din of Kinoi. the din of warning one's wife not to be secluded with a man. We're about 25 lines, smack in the middle of the Amid at the 2 dots. Says the Gemara, Hamikane, the first word of the Mishnah, as we pointed out from Rashi, this is the word that means Asra. And Rashi taught us that we use the word Kinoi. Why? Because that's a Lashon HaTorah. But says the Gemara, Hamikane means one who warned. The story happened. From there, says the Gemara, Di'everin, it seems that this whole story is a din b'di'eved. Seems like there's no makom lechatchila to warn one's wife. Explains the Gemara, Kesavar Tana Didan, our Tana, our Mishnah holds, Aser liknois. It's forbidden for a husband to warn his wife, and the reason is it's going to cause shalom bayis issues. It's going to cause situations. As Rashi here points out, that Aser Liknois, Rashi says it brings to fights, and his wife to be disgusted and being embarrassed, even if she's Tahira. Therefore, this is not the appropriate course of action. If one has issues, deal with your issues, but don't start warning your wife and creating Sotahs. Says the Gemara, a very, very famous Gemara, Amar Shua Bar Yitzchak, Kavei Pasuk Rish Lacha B'Sotah. When Rish Lakish would begin learning and darshaning the Torah about Sotah, Amar Hachi would say as follows: Ein mizavgin la'adim isha elofi ma'isaf. There's only a zivug to a person according to his own actions. And as Rashi, again, we're going to keep on referencing back to Rashi, that a tznuah gets a tzaddik, a pruta gets a rasha, in accordance to the level of sitkis, of righteousness of the woman, will be her husband, and vice versa. How do we know this? Says the Gemara Shenemar, as the pasuk teaches us, Ki lo yanuach shevet harasha al goyra al hatzadikim. It will not rest the shevet, the rod, the stick of the rasha, on the lot of the righteous. The rasha and the tzaddik don't go together. So it's all according to your own actions. And what the Gemara is pointing out, that if one has a situation in which his wife is having an issue with a man, he has to look inward, because one only marries one who on the same level of righteousness as himself. Continuing on such a topic, Amar Rabbi Rav Chanam Rav Yochanan, a very famous line, V'kashin l'zivugin kekriyas yamsuf. The zivugin, marriages, shadolchim, are difficult to Kadosh Baruch Hu, whatever that means, like splitting the sea so timely as we're about to split the sea in a few days, Kriyas Yamsuf, by the Yom Tov of Pesach. Shenemar, the pasuk says, Elokim Moshav Yechidim Baisa. Hashem gathers the Yechidim, those who are single, Baisa, into a house. He makes a shidduch of 2 single people, they come together, and now they have a beautiful house. Moitzi asirim b'koi sharais. He releases prisoners at the appropriate moment, and from here we see that what is this prisoners? This is referencing Yitzias Mitzrayim. When we were avadim, we were in prison, and we were gotten out. So we see over here that the Shadochim, the Yechidim Baisa, is equated to the leaving of jail, Yitzias Mitzrayim. Says the Gemara, really? Eini? Is Shadochim so difficult? 40 days even before the Valad is created. Pascal Yoitzas, the heavenly voice goes out, Vaimaras, Pas Ploini LePloini, that this man is going to marry this woman, Beis Ploini LePloini, this house is for this person, Sotah Ploini LePloini, this field is for this person, everything is preordained. Those who are Zoichet to be part of the incredible Hachzik program, learning Chavis Al-Vavais, we're in the middle of learning about this topic, how there's the original decree, how Hashem puts it into action, and of course there is the Ishtadlos, of course there are the actions of man to get there, but everything is part of the original decree. So says the Gemara, why are you telling me Zivugim are so shver, so difficult like Kriyas Yamsuf? Everything is preordained 40 days, Kaidem, 40 days prior to the creation. Answers the Gemara like Kasha, Hab is a Grishan, Hab is a Ksheni. Answers the Gemara, the difference is between when it comes to the first marriage, That is what is announced 40 days prior. And that is what goes with ease. The second marriage, that is what is dependent upon his own actions. And that is the reason why it's as difficult as the Kriyas Yamsuf. That's really the connection of the Gemara over here. When we're saying that Yechidim Ba'isa is like Kriyas Yamsuf, that's similar to saying that the Rasha gets married to the person who's not so good, and the Tznuah gets married to the Tzaddik. That type of marriage to fit people perfectly together, that's like Kriyas Yamsuf. It says the Gemara, it's only by the Zivug Sheni, a second marriage. Obviously, much Torah is said on this Gemara, but for now, as always, we have to go weiter. We're about 8 lines from the bottom at the 2 dots, and we continue in the din of the Mishnah. How many Eidim are necessary for Kinu Yustira, for warning and seclusion? Rav Eliezer Aimer Mekanal Al Pi Shnayim. Eliezer says Kinu warning is with 2, whereas when it comes to drinking the bitter waters, the Me'amarim, the Ma'isayta, he could do it by himself or with an Eid Echad. Whereas Rav Yeshua argued and said everything needs 2 Eidim. Says the Gemara, Ad kan loy pligi elo bikinu yustira. What's the machlokes Rav Eliezer and Rav Yeshua? How many Eidim you need by the kinu, the warning? How many Eidim you need by the stira, by the seclusion? Aval bitoma. But the amount of Eidim that actually see the defilement, the Maisa Tashmish, Eid Echad Mehemin. Once you have the requisite number of Eidim by the kinu, the warning, then everyone will agree that 1 Eid will suffice that saw the actual tashmish. Utina nami, and continues the Gemara and says, and we learned as well, Eid Echad Omer. If 1 Eid says, Ani Reisi Shenitmeis, I saw that this woman had been defiled. Lo Haisa Shaisa, Mid Lo Haisa Shaisa. She no longer drinks the Meisaita. Why? Because there's a credibility to 1 Eid, and therefore shall be forbidden to her husband, because 1 Eid saw that she committed the Aveira. So the Machlokes is only going to be for the Kinu and the Stira. Before we turn over the page, let's look about 7 lines into Rashi. Rashi, first on the wide lines, first on the line is Kan. Ad kan loy pligel b'kinu stira. Kiloimar. We always know Kiloimar and Rashi means it's not a simple explanation. Ad kan loy shamanu miplugtayu. We only were able to deduce from the Machlokes, Rav Eliezer and Yeshua, even in Shnei Eidim, that when do you need 2 witnesses? Elo b'kinu the Rav Eliezer, according to the warning for Rav Eliezer, the Kinui and the Stira for Rav Yeshua. But for the Tumah, im yesh Eidim b'kinu yustira. Once you have 2 requisite Eidim, continues Rashi, and then yesh Eid echad shel kilkala. There's 1 Eid that she was defiled b'stirasa when she was secluded. Naman, that 1 Eid is believed, and therefore what's the difference? That there's a credibility. There's no longer a potential for Sotah. She does not drink eliyatzib like suba, basula balu bayu chuma, which are the regular dinim of one who is mizaneh. So says the Gemara, that is the din in the Mishnah. And now from there, we have to figure out midaraisa minalan de mehemen echad. Where do we know this is true? How do we know that with regard to nitmeis, there is a din of nemanos of 1 Eid? Says the Gemara, Yisayis, a line which is quoted all over Shas. Titanu Rabbanan, we learned in our Brisa 2 lines from the bottom. Ve'eid ein ba, says in the pasuk, and there is no Eid. What does it mean there's no Eid? The word Eid, says the Gemara, Bishnayim akasim medaber. Doesn't mean there's not 2 Eidim that saw the act of defilement. Or maybe it means it's not even 1 Eid that saw the act. Parenthetically, we'll point out, if there's not even 1 Eid, that means there's no one that saw anything. So what in the world, how do we know what happened? The Gemara is going to get to this in Amud Beis. But what does the pasuk mean, says the Gemara? Ve'eid ein ba, does it mean that there's not 2 or there's not 1? Talmud loymar, therefore says the pasuk lo yakum eid echad beish. An eid echad should not stand up against the man, and we turn over to Beis Amid Beis, and explains the Gemara, Mimash Masha Nemar, for the fact that the pasuk says, Lo Yakum Eid Beish. From the fact that the pasuk says, a Eid should not stand up a man, meaning if it didn't say Echad, it just said an Eid. Would I not know any idea? Would I not know with the pasuk saying Lo Yakum Eid Beish? Would I not know Shu Echad that it means one Eid? What is the reason that the pasuk says Echad? Zeh Bana'av. This is a binyan av. This is a source. This teaches us that everywhere else, Kol Makam, 3 lines down, Beis and Beis, says the Gemara. This teaches us everywhere else, Kol Makam. Any time that we're going to find Shenemar Eid, that 2-letter word Alin Dalit is going to be used in the Torah. Hare Kan Shnayim. From the fact that in one place the Torah says Lo Yakum Eid Echad, specifies one Eid. That teaches me that if it wants to say one, it's going to specify. Whereas if it doesn't specify, it just says Eid, it means 2. Ad until Sheyifrait Lecha Kasov, till the pasuk is going to specify Echad, till the pasuk is going to specify 1. So says the Gemara, Lo Yakum Eid Echad Be'esh, teaches me that when the Torah says elsewhere Ve'eid Ein Ba, what does that mean? There are not 2 Eidim, but rather there's going to be 1 Eid that saw what's going on, and that's going to be enough of an Amados. And that is the Raya, that in our Mishnah, the Machlekes of Elazar and Rav Yeshua, with regard to Kinyu Stira, with regard to the warning and the seclusion, is only specifically for that. Do you need 2? But for Tumah, everyone will agree 1 is enough. Says the Gemara, so now the Torah is teaching us, Trey Lesba, you don't have 2 Eidim over here, Elachad, only 1 Eid, saying that there was a Maisa Zinos, Vehi loy nitpasa. And what does the pasuk conclude? She was not forced. What does that show us? Asura. She wasn't forced, meaning if she was forced, then she'd be mutares. By the pasuk saying she was not forced is a way of teaching us she's asur. So even though there's only 1 Eid, she's still forbidden. Again, I know one that when the Torah says ve'eid ein ba means 1, because elsewhere it says lo yakum eid echad beish. So that shows that everywhere else the word eid must mean 2. So there's not 2 but 1, and vihi lo nitbasa means she is asura. Elatai, so ask the Gemara. Okay, 6 lines down. Elatai, because lo yakum eid echad beish. The reason that we know that eid ein ba means 2, that they're not 2 but 1, is the reason because the Torah said lo yakum eid echad beish elsewhere. Halav hachi avamina eid desaita chadu. If not, then you would have thought, what's the havamina? The havamina was eid ein ba means there's not even 1 eid. Says the Gemara, how can you have such havamina? That's silly. V'afilu chad leka. But my mistera. If there's not even 1, then who knows what's happening? So why do you even need a pasuk? It's obvious that it means that there's not 2, because 1 would be impossible. Explains the Gemara, no, it's derech, we need it. Sel kedei techamin, I would have thought ein ba. Inemon ba. I would have thought, you know what it means? Not that there's not even 1. I would have thought it means that there's not even 2, but there's not an amanos. Says the Gemara, ein nemon ba, ve'lamai ba, eid. But if there's no namanos, then what was ve'lamai ba? Then for what reason does you need it? Adiika tray till you have 2. Lishta kram, just don't write anything. Why? Well, if you don't write anything, then how will we know what level of namanos what you would need to create a credibility? Simple. Davar mi mamain. We'll learn now from elsewhere. We know that generally mamanis davar means you need 2 eidim. And now I would know. Just like all eidos in the Torah needs 2, so to here as well needs 2. So why would we need a specific pasuk? Explains the Gemara, Itzrich. No, we do need this pasuk. About 13 lines to the top. First line is Itzrich. Why? Salkadei Chamina Sotah shiny. Why would Sotah be different? Diraglayim ledavar, like we just had at the end of Nazir, because there's something to stand upon. What's this something to stand upon? Sharei kina lavin istera, because there was a warning and they secluded. So maybe you would think letamin ba eid echad. Maybe one aid would be believed, so you would need a pasuk to teach us elsewhere. Says the Gemara, really? You have a half of me, one aid would be believed. Visharya. You're going to tell me that the Havamina was that your mutter, obviously you're not mutter. Finally says the Gemara, you're right. Itzrich. I would have thought adika trey. And even by two is only if you're not forced. So therefore the chiddush is eid ein ba. Has to mean that there's not two, but there's one aid, and that is the raya, that when it comes to our sugya, one aid will have a ne'emanis. It is getting late, big daf to start off the Masechta, but let's just dive into the next Gemara. We'll make a dent, we'll call it a day, and we'll wrap up loose ends tomorrow. Rabbi Yeshua, 8 lines from the wide line, says Rabbi Yeshua, says Rabbi Yeshua, he warns her with 2 eidim. My time Rabbi Yeshua get this, they need 2 eidim for the kinoi and 2 eidim for the stira makra. Ba, it says in it, ba, answers the Gemara or about her. Ba, v'loi bekinoi. Ba, v'loi bestira. So ba ve'eid ein ba teaches us that when do we say that an eid echad has an emanos? Ba v'loi bekinoi, now with the warning. Ba an eid echad is believed. V'loi bestira, now with the seclusion. Rav Eliezer comes like Rav Eliezer Aimer, and he says that no. Says Rav Eliezer ba v'loi bekinoi, but not with regard to stira. Stira you still need. Stira you could believe I've won. Ve'ema ba v'loi bestira. Says the Gemara, wait, maybe ba teaches me and not in the stira. How does Rav Eliezer know not? Because stira is kishlet toma. Because the seclusion is similar to the act of toma. How do I know? V'nistra v'hinitma. Says the Gemara, wait, kinoi nami, the same thing as kishlet toma. The warning is the same thing. Why? Because the chsev says the pasuk v'kini es ishta v'hinitma. So how do we know? Answers the Gemara. Hamiyat rachmana ba. But there's an exclusion. So says Gemara, my rayis. We're stuck in a corner over here. Because the Torah equates everything together and then excludes something with the word ba. So how do we know what's excluded? And how do we know what's included? So says the Gemara, mistavra. We go with logic. Says the Gemara on the first wide line. What's the logic? Stira adifa. Seclusion is better. Shkenai seres ketoma. Because it makes her usher like the act of zinos. Says Maradirabba. Kino yadif. Shkein ikr garamla. Because that's the ikr that's getting the party started with the warning. Answers the Gemara. Ilav stira. If they never were secluded. Kini miika. What would the warning do? But says the Gemara back. Vilav kinoi. Stira mayahani. But if there was no warning, what would the seclusion do? Answers the Gemara, Filo hachi, you're right, but stira difa, why? Aschalta de tomahi. So the Gemara concludes that the aschalta starting off the toma, that is the strongest, and that is the reason why that will have a different din according to Rav Eliezer, that even according to Rav Yeshua, you always need 2. But Rav Eliezer says no, that regarding the stira, 1 aid will be believed. Why? Because it's a schalta de toma, therefore it's similar to the actual act of toma where 1 aid is believed. We're going to stop over here. P'siyat Shmaya will plug in the loose ends tomorrow.